So I'd like to take just a few moments this morning to celebrate what I consider to be an enormous opportunity that your elected officials have articulated already. And I, for one, very much appreciate them being here. I know they're all busy, and I think it bodes well for the future of your community and this initiative as I currently understand it. I said, I think more than a decade ago, that this region stands on the threshold of enormous change. And with that comes the opportunity for creating a new model for healthy living in America at the community scale. And so today we begin exploring what that might look like, and I brought along a few images to help you envision what you might want to create as a future for your community. I thought it would be important for us to know and be reminded of the fact that we're living in times of enormous change. This particular diagram, which is a little hard to see, is an indication of climate change and weather events, and specifically the frequency and intensity of those events and how they've changed in recent times. So this is a satellite view from down under, looking back at the planet, and you can see the level of activity in a few images after Sandy. And we could talk about record-breaking ice melt and a variety of things, but I think more important for you might be to consider the water systems. This is a photograph, if it's not obvious, of the Colorado River, which hasn't reached the Sea of Cortez for more than a decade. Normally when we do something like begin a planning initiative for a region, we start with a watershed map. Ironically, your watershed map is not a normal watershed map, which is right down here, thanks to Robert Thiel, and it's important to know what's happening in the watershed, but in fact your watershed gets increased by pipes and pumps to the Colorado River, and you are one of the reasons, of many, that it is no longer a river that reaches the ocean. So that has enormous economic impacts and environmental impacts on your region and on your quality of life and well-being. And that's part of what we want to explore today. Einstein spoke of this many times, saying that we need substantially a new manner of thinking if humankind is to survive. He also said doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different outcome is the definition of stupidity. So we might look at that a little bit. One of my professors, Bob Filner, talked about these same issues, and he believed firmly that every decision we make as an individual, especially as a community leader or an architect and engineer, has a very direct impact on the vitality of the spaceship Earth or not. You're either increasing the capacity or decreasing, no exceptions. As I've looked back over a quarter of a century of our practice, what I have discovered in preparing for this is that we have changed our focus dramatically, starting at the building scale, trying to make beautiful buildings for people, to the neighborhood scale, watershed, airshed, job shed, etc. And the buildings today are a lot more about human well-being and revitalizing the landscape in which we find ourselves than anything else. Same is true if these are 8 top 10 National Green Building Awards that we've received. And when I look at these buildings, the same thing applies. The first buildings, while they were beautiful and did a good job for the client and tenants, had very little to do with revitalizing a community or region, and today that's really the focus. There are enormous benefits and returns. We hear a lot about, well, this sounds really good, but there's just not enough money. And the truth is, for example, the building in the middle, which was a state office building for the Missouri Department of Natural Resources, after we were hired, the state director said, Bob, you're that green firm, we'd like one of those platinum buildings. Platinum, for those that don't know, is the highest level of third-party certification under the U.S. Green Building Council. And I said, Steve, we'd love to give you one. Could we talk about the budget and the schedule? And he said, absolutely. And we might be able to change the schedule, but if we ask for more money, we were granted this money 2 years ago, and if we ask the legislature for more, they will not only not give it to us, they'll take the building away. So we designed and built a platinum level office building for a standard state office building budget that was 2 years out of date the day we began work. And that's more the norm now than an exception. So don't accept the myth that this is just too expensive and too difficult. Bill Reed has done this interesting diagram, I think, that explains this evolution in the entire movement and country. And standard practice is down in the bottom, the red, and as you move up to the middle, the horizontal line is essentially where general practice is today, which is often referred to as sustainable design, which basically means doing less damage to the environment by design. Where we really need to be is at the top and the right-hand side, which is a regenerative approach, and that is your opportunity here. So I'm asking you really to skip over all these other steps and just go for a regenerative strategy. And that really means accepting our role as an integral part of nature and becoming a co-creator with nature to improve the social, economic, and environmental vitality simultaneously. The one building rating system, and now community rating system, that reaches for that is called the Living Building Challenge. And it was an attempt to move beyond platinum, which is third-party certification. You're doing less damage to the environment than anyone else, but in fact you're still doing damage, to doing something positive. So it's about generating more energy than it consumes, purifying more water than it wastes, being built of healthy materials, etc. We were fortunate to win the first national design competition for a living building with this project in Rhinebeck, New York, on the Hudson River, about an hour north of the city. And this building meets those attributes, but more importantly, it not only purifies its own wastewater, it purifies all the waste from 150 buildings on their campus. And it does so in this picture to the upper right. It looks like a garden in a greenhouse, which it is, but it's also the sewage treatment plant. It is also the first time a yoga class has claimed the sewage treatment plant as their venue and their studio. So this building has kind of off the charts for performance, and it's been documented globally, significantly, but most importantly, it is pedagogical. Everyone who comes there to learn or to teach, or the community who visit it, get changed by the experience, including the director, Skip, who said, "Bob, this building has changed my life, and now I intend to change this building and the community as we improve it over time," which he has already done. So this is the building the day we commissioned the sewage treatment plant, this living machine. I built this presentation on the way here on the plane, and I realized I don't have a current image. If I did, you couldn't see the people because this is now a jungle all the way up to the roof in 5 years. What we really want to focus on this morning, and particularly in the breakout, is community transformation. And I chose some of our experience in helping communities rebuild after disasters as a way to look at that a little bit with you. We have now worked in 13 communities following a natural disaster. And you can see them listed here, but the one I'm choosing is not some of the big ones like New Orleans and Houston and Haiti. It is a little town of Greensburg, Kansas, which a few years ago was eliminated from the face of the earth, but for one grain elevator. We learned that reinforced concrete cylinders attached is a really strong shape. This was a view looking north on Main Street the morning after the storm. I had learned from working for more than a decade at that point in this kind of work that it was important to go through what I am now calling a community dialogue of discovery, which you will be beginning immediately following my remarks. But in this case, while we've been doing that for a few years, I found something new in this event. Normally we look for the largest gymnasium in the region, and in this case they had lost everything but the grain elevator, and it wasn't a great place to have meetings. So FEMA was nice enough to give us these circus tents. And we first hosted a meal for all the people who had, of course, moved all throughout the region to find temporary housing. And they came back to this circus tent to have a meal together and to greet one another and to celebrate the lives that were lost and to begin envisioning their future. Because it was a meal and a celebration and a gathering, for the first time in this dialogue, all the women and children were present. And what I discovered is, in that dialogue, new questions were raised and different answers were demanded than I had ever experienced before, and more at that time than 9 communities that we had done previously. And today we very much make that a part of the process. So they created their own vision and mission. We spent a lot more time listening and speaking, which will be necessary here. It's really important. But out of that dialogue, they set these beyond the mission and vision. They set these specific goals. The first was energy. They decided they wanted to build back a community that was more durable and more resilient and more healthy than the one they had before. And with respect to energy, they wanted their new buildings to consume only half the energy the previous ones did in spite of their new higher performance. And they wanted to meet that energy need with renewable energy. And so we designed and built a privately funded wind utility that generates 5 times the energy this town will ever consume, and they sell the excess energy to the grid at a profit and therefore revenue to the community. Water was another huge concern. This is part of the breadbasket of the United States, and it takes water to grow wheat and other grains. And they normally get about 22 inches of rain a year, but recently, like last year, they got 5 inches. So that's challenging for farmers. And they gather water from the Ogallala aquifer to make up the difference, and the Ogallala is receding at the most accelerated rate in recorded human history. It's a little like the Colorado River, because that's what supports the grains that we all consume all the time. And so they want to do something to really acknowledge that and celebrate water and respect water differently. And so every drop of water that falls on that community today is seen as a precious resource. It's captured, it's stored, it's purified, it's reused, and it's stored until they need it when the rains don't come. And what we're discovering all over the planet is all events come less frequently but more intensely than ever before. And for farmers, that's really bad news relative to water. So this is what that Main Street looks like today, and right roughly in the center you can see the top of that grain elevator behind the business incubator, which was the first building we built in Greensbury, actually the second building, a community building, a platinum level building. This was the first city in America to adopt LEED Platinum as their standard. And so the first building was designed and built by students and is an arts center and community center. The second was the business incubator, and so on. Presidents Bush and Obama have both recognized this community and their work as the best example of rebuilding after this kind of a disaster, as has the Urban Landscapes Institute and the Financial Times in the UK, because they entirely changed the future and vitality of this community by design. So in Tuscaloosa, after their tornado, when we arrived, the mayor said, "We've done a lot of research, we hired exactly the right team, we're really impressed with all the community engagement that you use to inform the designs and master plans for development. But unfortunately, it's taken so long to get you here that we don't have time for that." And so I have appointed a 40-person steering committee that is representative of the entire neighborhood, and you can just work with them and pretend it's the whole neighborhood, because in effect it is the community. So we met with them. These 40 people included no women and one face of color. Tuscaloosa is roughly 50-50. So we went back to the mayor and said, "Sorry, this is not going to work for you or us, and if you persist, you'll have to do it without us." So we reached a compromise. My younger colleagues pointed out that we'd been using social media a lot, and they suggested maybe we could reduce the number of community meetings and use social media to supplement that. And so I reluctantly agreed. Even though I had seen its success, I was just reluctant that that would really bring the kind of energy we were hoping for. And so 2 weeks later, to the day after we launched this website, Tuscaloosa Forward, we had the first community meeting. And before such a meeting, we always ask best case, worst case, how many are going to show up? So we have enough facilitators, easels, tables, etc. On that occasion, roughly 2 weeks since we launched the site, twice best case showed up. We were a little overwhelmed. And as my colleague was asking how many of you have been to the website, and 75% of the hands went up, the mayor's whispering in my ear, "This is the most diverse meeting in the history of Tuscaloosa." We also asked, how many visits do you think we've had to the website? The highest estimate that night was 3,500. The answer that night was 39,000 in 2 weeks. It went from there to 150,000, 160,000, and ultimately more than 100 ideas that were launched on that community dialogue on social media were integrated in the comprehensive master plan and credited to the people who launched those ideas and debated them through that media. This diagram we created for a planning project in Oberlin, Ohio. We're working with them to create a new regional plan, and their goal is to create the first post-carbon economy in America. And so we started looking at all these systems. And we've listed all the natural systems and all the cultural systems, and what we've learned there is at the intersection that the relationships between those systems are ripe opportunities for what I would call catalytic change, for acupuncture. So looking at that and changing that relationship can dramatically improve the performance of the overall system, and we're seeing it time and time again. Margaret Wheatley has described the process that I think you're about to enter into as saying there is no power greater than a community discovering what it cares about. And I found that to be very true. And I see here, just in the preparation for this, that all of the elements are present to make that a reality for you, and I'm excited about it. Janine Benyus, the biomimicry expert, has said, life creates conditions that are conducive to life. And what we're finding in our community systems, we've actually created conditions that diminish life and diminish vitality. And we feel bad about it, but we don't know what to do about it. And the truth is, we can do everything about it. We can become co-creators with the larger natural systems, which include the economic and social systems, if we choose to do so. So I'm going to give you an example of this at a smaller scale than the region, because within this community and what you're beginning to define, there will be many opportunities for individual projects. And so this is one of those that I tend to call urban acupuncture. So I'll give you our working definition. We see that as a strategic investment of leadership, design, and capital at a critical place, at a critical time, to create catalytic positive change. So in this case, it was in a neighborhood called Manheim Park in Kansas City, Missouri, our community, that our newspaper, the Kansas City Star, refers to as the killing zip code for a reason. And this was a school that had been dark for 15 years, and you'll notice the land around it is pretty empty because half of the buildings have been lost to fire and other negative events. And only half of the half that remains are occupied. So it's become a place for drug gangs and prostitution, and the people live there in fear, and hence the killing zip code. So this community decided the best thing we could do to help them transform that neighborhood was to find a new use, an adaptive use for that school that would provide this catalytic force. And so it is now under construction, and it will be a housing for mostly single moms in the school itself, plus a clinic, plus a computer lab, plus a community center. And the new housing, the attached townhomes around it, will be for families, and all of this in collaboration with the larger neighborhood is about building new and restoring human capacity and building new capacity for this neighborhood and the community that surrounds it. With the encouragement of that, and I need to give credit to Brad Pitt and Make It Right, we've been working with them since Katrina, and we needed some philanthropy, and I asked if they would come to Kansas City and help us do there what we've been doing in New Orleans, and they agreed. So they filled the gap between all the stacked financing we could create and what we really wanted to get transformative change. So we have now formed a little development company, 5 of my friends and myself, working in partnership with BNIM, our architectural and planning firm, to do this urban acupuncture. And we've made offers on 5 schools. These are 2 of the 5. In fact, I've been getting email exchanges on our offer since I've been here. But these 2 schools we see as that kind of catalytic opportunity, and there will be many like this in your community, and I thought I would just walk through this rapidly to give you a sense of how it can work. So one school is we think of as the Center for Community Vitality. And it will be primarily housing, but it will also be the home of 7 not-for-profits who have been in the city for as much, in one case, 40 years, and others for 2 or 3. But in collaboration, they all work to increase human potential and the efficiency and vitality of our community and its systems. The larger school on the right is a center for creativity and innovation that will include 3 academies, think school, from about the 3rd grade up through to the 12th grade in 3 different academies, think lower, middle, upper, and it will include an institute in partnership with business community and an incubator to change the kind of thinking and to build more innovation and creativity and new business spinning out of that institution. So we started with the community. There were 3 neighborhoods that surround this property, and we asked them, what is important to you? And we've been certain that we build these high priorities into every design program and development program for these 2 schools. And we've looked seriously at how we then extend that into the neighborhood. We think of this as a healthy virus that infects the surrounding neighborhood and starts a positive infection that moves out into the larger community. And because of that, we've gotten some really interesting partners like the Harvard School of Public Health and people you normally wouldn't see involved in a project in Kansas City, Missouri. So these are some of the things that will be at the Center for Creativity and Innovation. To save time, I'm only going to describe the one on the lower right. I chair a not-for-profit called Mind Drive, and we work with at-risk high school kids. So 4 years ago, our kids got together and designed and built this car you see them standing behind. This is an electric car. They created it on computers, then we built it. We contacted Bridgestone for low-friction tires because we knew they were working on that, and they agreed to bring the tires. And when they saw this car and the kids, they just flipped out, and they asked if they could take the car and our young people to their test track in Texas, which they did. When they ran it for a week, they discovered it shattered all the records on the planet for efficiency. The $10 million X-Prize car got about 137 miles to the gallon, and our car got 444 miles to the gallon. Yeah. So these were 16 students from the high school of last resort, all lived in the Killing zip code and really pretty much felt they were on a dead-end course. And now they have scholarships, and now they're making the grades, and now the world has changed for them entirely. And they've been to the White House, they've been to the Indianapolis 500, Pixar invited them to Pixar out here for the launch of Cars 2, etc. So we're looking then at how these kinds of moves can influence the neighborhood around it, and there are enormous opportunities for this in this place and in this region. And just to give you one example, the neighborhood in which these schools are located has a $150 million problem in redoing their sewers to deal with overflow control. That's sewage in stormwater because of combined sewers that now have to be separated. If that whole neighborhood operated like these 2 schools, there would be nothing entering the storm sewer because all of that we see as a resource, and it becomes nutrients for the community gardens. And all the human waste and all the water end up as nutrients in that system. And so the community would eliminate the $150 million expense and have it available to do other more interesting things. There will be an eco-concierge, which is basically a life coach to teach the residents how they can have a better lifestyle and all the resources available to them that would help them enjoy that. Again, I just mentioned this, we see all the waste as food, and we look at this as an urban metabolism to create new systems and new economies and new approaches to community living, including, obviously, food, which we'll be celebrating, I understand, today here after the breakout sessions. So Cultivate Kansas City is one of those tenants. They're the best urban ag teacher in our region. This will be their office and their central teaching site and their certification site. And the food that's grown there will be carried literally 100 feet to this commercial kitchen where we are creating a new culinary institute that will be teaching farm to fork and healthy food and healthy lifestyles. And one of our other tenants is KC Healthy Kids, who will be using this facility to teach all the other school districts in this region how to do exactly the same thing. For example, the kids in Mind Drive this year, in an incubator that we will put in this facility, we hope to start building electric town cars and making them available for rent that will provide ongoing revenue to drive this program and future educational needs in this system. I think, in this case, this will change the way the average Kansas Citian sees community, defines community, and defines business and the future. And from what I know about San Diego, I think the opportunities are far greater here than we have in Kansas City. I'm excited to listen to what you think are the things you care about the most, and which of these strategies apply to you, and which new strategies you need to create that haven't been created anywhere else on the planet. As you go to the breakout session, think about what this young woman will be seeing in the year of perfect vision, the year 2020, which is only 7 years out. We often do these 10, 20, 50-year visions, but the needs we have are enormous, and the opportunities are enormous, and it's time that we really act now with intelligence and creativity and collaboration and haste. And so I think 2020 is a year that we focus on a lot more for that reason. I would encourage you to think about that today as you do the same thing. Thank you very much.